So, what if your patients aren't exactly telling you the whole story? Behind every hearing test, fittings, or follow up appointments, there's a hidden secret or a script, things that patients think or feel or even Google at 2 a.m. in the morning, but won't say it to your face. You always believe that they always speak their mind, but yet, what if they aren't really telling you everything? Well, today we're going to be breaking the silence, no pun intended here. Here's what your patient wished you knew and how you can use these insights to build trust, improve your marketing outcomes, and grow your practice. Hi, my name is Eric Abraham, and I have a hearing loss, and I've been a patient to many clinics. And I also launched a startup targeting people who are deaf and hard of hearing to help them become aware of emergency sounds that are calling for their attention using AI and smart devices. And along the way, I have developed the expertise in marketing and been featured in the media, which is why I'm sharing with you all of my experiences on this channel. So one of the first things that you might find that patients might talk about is I trust Reddit more than you. I was in a situation where I had to do a lot of research online. And what I found is a lot of Facebook groups where many people with hearing loss would be able to have conversations about certain challenges that they experience. And one thing that was very interesting is that most often a lot of people with hearing loss would ask other people with hearing loss certain questions that I thought would be more applicable for audiologists to answer, like what hearing aid should I buy, or what is going on with this ringing, and certain things that sound very medical. And I always thought it was very interesting. Why is it that some people find it very compelling to be able to talk to strangers on the internet versus speaking to a well-trained medical audiologist? Well, this is why it was happening because a lot of times there is this disconnect, or I would say a hierarchy that between audiologist and patient. And I think a lot of people want peers. They want somebody to engage that they feel that they can trust and be able to give them insight that they need. And I think this is the opportunity for clinics that understand the patient audiologist relationship, where you're giving advice as a friend, wanting to help and support their journey. So here are the ways that you need to address this in your marketing. First of all, I think you need to think about what are the various personas that exist in my clinic. So they could be anything from the kind of talented musician, it could be the young working professional, or it could be the individuals who are retired. And if you build content to speak to these various individuals that feel very personal and to the person who is consuming the content, that kind of atmosphere that you create, whether it's online or offline, really creates an opportunity for people to trust you and want to engage with you first versus a bunch of strangers on in the internet. Another opportunity to build that kind of peer-to-peer relationship is having these Q&A sessions or workshops, either in your clinic or virtually, to engage people with opportunities to ask questions. Because I think what happens is when people are going online and they're seeking information, it's because they don't know there might be a cost associated with engaging with you. But if you approach your marketing efforts as being helpful with content or certain sessions that you can bring people together with basic questions, you don't have to go into detail. Those workshops, the Q&As, will provide opportunity for people to ask those questions. And the last thing you should think about is letting your other previous existing clients do the talking. Again, people want to be able to have a conversation with people that they like and trust. And often when you have people who represent the problems and challenges that they're going through and they can see it firsthand and engage with them, or even just listen to the stories or feel related to these stories, that was really powerful. And I say you can do this either in the form of your video testimonials or just having workshops where you bring the existing patient to talk about their experiences in their hearing journey. So number two is I'm extremely embarrassed to be here and I hide my hearing aids. As someone like myself, I have a hearing loss. And I've been going through a personal journey of my own, building confidence around my hearing loss, which didn't really exist in many years before. To be honest, I really hid my hearing aids. I tend to like to cover my ears, not expose it to the public because there was a sense of shame around my hearing loss. Now, I always thought that I was the only one doing this. It was a bad habit of mine until I met a lot of other people with hearing loss, and I realized we're all doing the same thing. Sometimes we're faking it when we have conversations with other hearing individuals, pretending to know what they're saying. But at the reality of all of this, we realize is that we're really not doing any justice for ourselves. And I realized that a lot of my audiologists really didn't really see that. And maybe that's because I was really good at hiding it, but maybe I wasn't and they didn't mention it. But I think it's important for audiologists to be advocates for hearing care and to help destigmatize hearing loss. Here are a few tips that you can help address this situation. Thinking about when you're writing content around your website or your email newsletter, you are being intentional about destigmatizing hearing loss. And so there's certain words and your approach that apply to behavior science that improve the outcome of destigmatization. It's really important to be able to address these situations. And here's a few tips that I have to really help build and improve your content so you're ensuring that we're making people with hearing loss feel more comfortable and confident with the fact that they have hearing loss. One is that there are two forms of people who can communicate to destigmatize, and that is the expert, yourself, and other individuals with hearing loss. Anybody else in not considered effective approach to be able to help destigmatize hearing loss. Another thing that's very important when it comes to your content is that you can kind of talk about certain life goals that we can all relate to. So it could mean that somebody who is an athlete who wants to run for the marathon. It could be somebody who is a working professional, talk about what their lives are and the common goals that community share. Or it could be somebody who's in retirement and what exactly is the common goals that they often share. The more that you can speak to commonalities of people with or without hearing loss and showing you are the pathway to that journey is more effective in helping to destigmatize hearing loss. At the end of the day, your goal is to help destigmatize hearing loss. So it's not something that is an old person problem, but it's a problem that affects us all. Number three is one thing that the patient won't exactly tell is that they don't trust your expertise. Now, this might come really harsh, but in the reality is that sometimes from personal experience, and I think a lot of other people have gone through it as well, is that often when somebody meets me for the very first time, they make an assumption and start to sell me certain types of hearing aids. But in reality, if you look at me, I don't sound like somebody who has a profound hearing loss. But it's true, I do have a profound hearing loss. So to put it in perspective, without my hearing aids, my world is extremely, extremely quiet. In fact, I won't be able to hear my voice as I'm speaking to you right now. It becomes a huge shock after I do a hearing test, and a lot of the audiologists or the technicians they meet me and realize that I'm not exactly what they thought when at first glance. And I always used to think of that as a lack of expertise. But the one audiologist that can actually effectively do this well is usually somebody who really knows what my pain points are. And they can usually find that out by engaging and having conversations with me. They kind of put this light bulb moment when we're having these conversations. So one of the other things that I see often when you come to an audiology clinic or a hearing clinic is the fact that they don't have services that appeal to what somebody with a hearing loss needs. For example, one thing I noticed is that often I don't see the option for sending a text message or any other form of communication like email to make a booking. And I always thought it was very strange. In a world where people have the lack of ability to hear, it seemed to me that you don't really know or understand the experiences that we go through. So just even having those little small touches where you can provide text messaging services that we can communicate via text with the receptionist or the front of staff, or even just an email option to do bookings. The other thing that I also see is that there's an opportunity for anybody who's working in a hearing clinic is the ability to understand the pain points that people experience, especially with hearing loss. Here's an example. I was approaching this new clinic and I was engaging with the audiologist in this new clinic. We were going through my hearing test and what possible hearing aids that I can look at. And at one point, she mentioned that I should not be in a situation where when I'm going out in the nightclub, when I was in my youth and going out into the clubs and hanging out and socializing, she thought it was very important that I had the hearing aids to be able to interact and communicate to people and when I'm in those situations. And that was kind of like my light bulb moment. Now, there was a lot of factors that came into that conversation because I had previously was wearing an analog and I was switching to a digital hearing aid. And of course, I had some previous disappointments with other clinics because I felt the hearing aids were just too quiet and inefficient for the type of world that I operate in. I really need to be able to communicate and connect with people. It was very important for me to be able to hear. And so she was able to speak to that pain point and give specific scenarios in my life that where I would be able to achieve this success. And when she articulated it, I became very much a loyal to that person. And so I think it's really important when you can speak to the pain point, the challenges that people face, and you can provide a solution to help bridge them to get to that point, it's tremendously valuable. And that's how we know that you are truly an expert. Number four is that your clinic kind of feels like a car dealership. Now, I understand that industry is predominantly driven by profit and it shows. And in fact, it's uncomfortable as an individual who's exploring new clinics and I come across clinics that really are heading for the closure and they want to sell the hearing aid right away. I find that it's unauthentic. I don't feel comfortable at all. And here's a perfect example. I was living in a downtown area in Toronto. During the time when I was living downtown, there's really no opportunity for me to go to my audiologist to get hearing aid batteries. And this is the time before I could go on Amazon or even the local drugstore to be able to purchase these hearing aids. And I went to the clinic in the hope that they would be able to sell me these hearing aid batteries and also tubing because that was also another challenge of mine. When I entered the front door, it felt very stiff. Can't really describe it, but I felt like I was in the wrong place. I realized that they wanted to get me in their email funnels to start to market and promote. And all I wanted was to get batteries and tubing. So when I went and entered into the store, I felt really tense. You can tell that they're ready to go and jump at the sharks to get that sale. And it was quiet. I went at a time when there was hardly any business, and it didn't seem like they were going to have any patients arriving any time. But all I wanted was the hearing aid battery. It was obvious to me in the front of the reception desk that is there, and some tubing if it's possible. And unfortunately, it didn't feel comfortable. When you are intense and you want the sale, it can really come across in the way that you interact with people. You want to come across authentic and helpful. So there are really two things that you need to be thinking about when it comes to your communication and your marketing, or even in the physical presence of your clinic. And that is, you don't want to be salesy. You want to make it feel like somebody's coming into a sort of like a coffee shop where it's a very relaxed atmosphere If you're here for the Wi-Fi, that's totally fine. And if you want to get coffee, we're here to help as well. But you don't force the person into having a coffee. And the other thing I think is really important is that you are personable. You're here to help and show that you care about the person and you want to help them as much as you can. And I think that those two things can go a real long way to taking away the impression of a hearing clinic operating as like a car dealership. Number five is that, and number five is a little bit of a fun one, but I think that I like to sort of kind of confess maybe. Um, but number five is that we cheat on our hearing test. At least we think we do, and we don't know. I've been having hearing loss since I was a young kid, and so I'm very, very comfortable within those hearing test booths. They tend to have the same words. As much as the person who's doing the hearing test is trying to disguise any possibility of me lip reading, I think I had mastered it really well. Even with the paper over your face, I can sort of see with all the facial muscles what are the possible words that I'm hearing with the sounds that are going through my ears. But overall, I think I'm trying to cheat my hearing test. And I know all the words. You know, it's ice cream, hot dog, airplane, ice cream, always the same thing. I kind of figure out that maybe if I can cheat my hearing test, I won't be feeling that bad about my hearing loss. And I think a lot of people are in that position. Nobody wants to be considered that something is wrong with them. And I think that hearing test as a word, it reflects on some kind of evaluation on your ability to be socially accepted. And I think that we need to help shift that narrative. So perhaps we can start to reframe the concept of hearing tests, less of an assessment and a judgment, but more into a discovery of insights of what are the typical sounds that you might be missing in your everyday life. These unspoken truths aren't criticism, they're opportunities. When patients feel heard, literally and emotionally, they become loyal advocates for your clinic. So if you find this interesting and you want more, wait for the hearing aid low battery tone coming up next to watch my other videos.